Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Ukrainian. Not forget that it's also Russian and Chinese sometimes show. So, what's happened in the last few days? We will discuss it right now. My name is Sasha Starr, and we have guest Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here. Hear me okay?
As always, yes,
Excellent.
Jonathan. My pleasure. And Ivan Kucherenko from Kyiv, Ukraine. Welcome to the show, Ivan.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here as well.
So for the last few days, all world was watching what's happened in Russia. And the first one to address that will be the specialist in Russian theme, Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. It's all yours now.
Well, thank you. So the events in here are it's not difficult to see that it's very much in favor of Ukraine for the internal disruption that it causes for the Russian political and military leadership. They now have to worry about internal stability, their internal stability, in addition to the success of the Ukrainian counteroffensive. And the Ukrainians are playing it masterfully. Yeah, they're not pushing it. They're not pushing it too hard. They are following. More and more people I notice have been quoting Napoleon when they say never interfere with an enemy who's in the process of either making a mistake or destroying himself. It's been put different ways, but that is what is occurring right now. The Russians are just messing up by the numbers, and it is the Ukrainians need to be just patient and persistent in the pursuit of their counteroffensive, looking for exactly the right time to commit their remaining reserves to hopefully get a clear and decisive victory on the battlefield to reinforce the political impetus for Russia to say, well, let's cut our losses. We've had enough of this. We need to fall back and regroup for several years, probably more. So given the internal dissension that's going on, the fact that it is clearly not settled down, it is clearly not under control. And so now the Ukrainians just need to be patient in the execution of their counteroffensive, and they also need to be persistent in pursuing additional Western aids as telling the Western leadership, especially the United States leadership, look, we have this. We've got this under control. We're doing the best we can with what we have. Give us just a little bit more, and we'll achieve even better results. And so I think the American leadership is slowly but steadily coming around to this point of view.
I like American response, or actually non-response to everything what's happened in Russia these days. They were not commenting. They were not making any forecasts what would be at the end of the day or so on. They were very quiet, very sober, and saying we are watching, we are following up everything what's happened. And I think they play their cards quite well. Ukraine is playing their cards very well also, because they actually were urged by NATO and US not to attack Russians too strongly because they have not.
Don't interfere. They're destroying themselves.
Russia is too fragile. Don't push it or it's broken completely.
Exactly. So the Ukrainians played very well their role. Putin, I was watching his speeches. He looks and he sounds miserable, absolutely incredible, like absolutely helpless, unconfident man. It's not the 25,000 Prigozhin army went to take over the Moscow. At the end of the day, they were on anywhere from 2,500 to maybe 5,000, no more than that, who actually were 200 kilometers from the Moscow, actually from the Moscow center. They were not very far from Moscow district or oblast. So with these 2,500 people, all Russia is the second strongest army in the world. 6,000 nuclear
They're not
bullets.
at this rate. At this rate, they're not even in the top 20 anymore.
That's a top, maybe
They're-
top
In
40.
American sports rankings, they would have fallen out of the top 20 rankings by now.
Yeah.
So
Well, how it was said it was the second army in the world. Then it became second army in Ukraine.
And now second army in Russia.
Second army in Russia. That's funny. Ivan, what's your thoughts? And because, of course, you were in Kiev and everything was happening, so you also had very valuable contacts and information. How did it look?
Yeah, actually, the Saturday was the day when I think most Ukrainians they've monitored not Ukrainian news channels in social networks in Telegram, but Russian ones, because there was so few information about what's going on in Ukrainian channels, and it was a lot of information about the situation in Russian, especially in regional Russian, like in Rostov City channel, where the main situation happened, and others. And in the evening, I myself, and I think most of Ukrainians as well, were completely disappointed with the end of this show, because actually, as we were monitoring how Prigozhin's Wagner group is advancing towards Moscow, when they shot down several helicopters and airplanes, including the flying command center Il-22, were really amazing, and everyone was discussing how much Ukrainian intelligence agency paid Prigozhin for this assistance in war. But when it all ended, we were really surprised that there is a joke in Ukraine that we've just seen a demo version of Russian Civil War, and in order to see the full version, we have to donate to Ukrainian army even more. So, but anyway, this situation showed how fragile is Russia and how it's overestimated by Western politicians, Western officials, even Western intelligences. Like they underestimated Ukraine on the beginning of this full-scale Russian invasion. This is another proof of how they overestimated Russia, and they hope that it will be hopefully the last situation after which the Western politicians will understand that probably it's time to dismantle Putin and his government at last, and actually it will end the war, and it will prevent the future nuclear war, because the ancestor of Putin, the one who will come after him, probably will be too busy with making peace with the whole civilized world, rather than to throwing the world into even more collapse and into even more battle. And the next president of Russia or Moscow region, I don't know what will remain of Russia after this collapse, also will be busy with is trying to keep Russia as one single piece, like it was during previous situations when collapsed Russian Empire, when collapsed Soviet Union. And I have a really nice video for today describing the history of Russian Empire and the consequences of the future collapse of Russia, which definitely will happen, and hopefully in the near future. So let's
Absolutely.
see it.
Let's see it.
Не знаю даже, сможет ли сохраниться такой этнос, как русский народ, в том виде, в котором есть сегодня. Ну, будут московиты какие-нибудь там, уральцы и так далее.
All ever existed empires are inevitably united by one fact: they fell apart. In the 21st century, it is impossible to come across news like Italy's attack in Egypt because it was once part of the Roman Empire. However, there is still one country that, disguised first as communism and then as a pseudo-democracy, is trying to conquer new territories. It is Russia. It is a terrorist state with a multi-million population consisting of 190 peoples. However, they came under the rule of Muscovy not because of their emigration, but through Russia's seizure of their territories. The enslaved peoples in Russia live in their own ethnic territories, which Moscow captured, exterminating part of their ethnic groups through repression, famine, and wars. The likelihood of war, Moscow's myrmidons in power, the absence of borders with external territories, and the lack of international support were the reasons why Tatarstan, Bashkortostan, Chuvashia, Sakha, Kalmykia, Buryatia, and many other republics remained part of Russia. The following policy of the Russian Federation was built around the titular nation, and despite the figure of 190 peoples, all humans in Russia had to identify themselves in only one way. Still, arriving for instance in Moscow, people with a Russian passport but of a different nationality face racism, being called names Guk, Slant-eyed, etc. The Russian authorities condemned any desire to preserve one's national identity, called it nationalistic, or classified it as extremism and thus banned it. Most of Russia's resources come from the territories of the captive nations. There is no Russian gas and oil. There are Siberian, Tatar, and Bashkir ones. There is no Russian gold and diamonds. There are Buryat and Yakut ones. And if before, in exchange for human resources, Russia offered the status of a citizen of a superpower with the second army of the world, the war against Ukraine shook this social contract. Therefore, the growing urge of various peoples within Russia to rebel against the Kremlin's policy is quite understandable. Moreover, military volunteer units with representatives of Ichkeria, Dagestan, Bashkortostan, and Siberia take part in the war against Russia on the side of Ukraine. And Karelians, Oirat Kalmyks, Ingrians, Ingush, Uralians, Tatars, Nogais, and Circassians are creating their own self-defense forces. There were vigorous protests against mobilization in Dagestan. The representatives of the enslaved peoples are waging a hidden struggle against Putin's regime, which is led by their leaders in exile. Moreover, the public platform Free Nations of Post-Russia Forum operates in exile. It unites representatives of Ingria, Ichkeria, Bashkortostan, the Republic of Kalmykia, the Republic of Sakha, Buryatia, Siberia, Tatarstan, Circassia, Karelia, Komi, and many others. The return of their sovereignty will help these countries quickly become prosperous, peaceful, and developed independent states that will have the opportunity to become part of a new architecture of collective security without the insane nuclear imperial Muscovy with its terrorism and aggression. Gas and minerals will once again become the commodity of individual free states and not the instrument of influence of the terrorist state on the collective West. The Moscow Empire has been falling apart for almost 100 years now. In 1917, the liberation of Suomi, the Baltic states, and Poland. 1991, the cessation of Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Armenia, and others. It is time for the third, final stage of the collapse of the terrorist empire. Freedom for all enslaved nations and colonies of Moscow.
Very good presentation, Ivan. Thank you so much. We all knew about this, but this was really shown in a very convincing way. And when you're talking about this war, it's first of all, it's a war between a highly backward country and a developing country, which is of fighting for its freedom and right for self-determination. It's also a colonial war. Russians see Ukraine as its colony and even so more dependent on the motherland, Russia, than, for example, even India in time when the United Kingdom had it as a colony, was much more independent than Ukraine from Soviet Union, for example. But the times are changing, and as India became independent country, so is Ukraine, already well over 30 years, became independent country. So right now it's a colonial war where empire is trying to turn its former colony back to its place, and it's not going to work out. It didn't work out with Algeria against France. It didn't work out against India and several other nations, against England, and so on. So this is a colonial. And finally, this is a national war. It's Russia is trying to completely destroy and annihilate Ukrainian nation. It's even worse than Holodomor, because right now people are being killed day and night in many cities. Infrastructure is being done. Jonathan, do you agree with this statement?
Well, the thing that this video called to mind, was this. I remember the statement of Viktor Mikhailov back in 1991, and when he was arguing for that Russia should have the entire former Soviet nuclear arsenal, and he described that the nuclear arsenal as, quote, one of the forces cementing the Federation. In other words, he saw it as a symbolic, the nuclear arsenal as a symbolic means of unifying the entire Russian Federation and keeping it all as one people and giving it the status of a great power. Now, that points to the solution that I've spoken of on previous editions of this program, in that the long-term solution, once Ukraine has driven Russia out of its territory and it now has its territorial integrity back, is that it should join together with NATO in forming and creating a global ballistic missile defense system, one which would be capable of neutralizing Russia's nuclear arsenal and making it, essentially removing the one factor that Russia considers makes it a great power in its own perception. Once that is done, once that is visibly neutralized and made ineffective in the eyes of the world, the last main force that Russia can rely on to establish national unity is gone, and its disintegration will only accelerate once it no longer has an effective nuclear arsenal with which to both unify its own people and threaten others, threaten aggression against other nations. So,
Jonathan, I would like to mention that I was very happy in the last couple of days that my theory of the blunders of U.S. policy in the 1991 and up to 1994, I would say, that it was completely wrong. Instead of taking out all these nuclear weapons from Russia, and it was so easy to do because Russia was so impoverished. They didn't have any food. So the U.S. started to send what they later called Bush's legs. It's a chicken legs, which U.S. was sending by loads of military planes to Russia to so make sure that people will not die. it's okay on a humanitarian level. Okay, you may agree with that, although not easily. But how not to say, okay, you want to eat? Get your nuclear weapons right here, put them on the table, and then you will eat. Or if you will not do that, you'll die. You will not have any food.
I
Okay?
think second time United States will not make such a mistake, and probably the. I agree with Jonathan that it's always good to have powerful defense systems, but it's better not to have an enemy or a weapon because of what you have to build such defenses, and maybe given their nuclear weapon will be a good way to lift sanctions from Russia. If Russia will still keep its nuclear arsenal, then probably it's better for Russia to be under sanctions. If they want, if the future government of Russia want these sanctions to be lifted from them, then they can give their nuclear arsenal. They can dismantle it, and sanctions may be lifted from them. But no free food, no more.
What I forgot to mention is, or actually I didn't have time, is that essentially it was for a long time, it was in a way my own theory, which I never heard from anybody else, anywhere else. And when I was mentioning it to other people, they were always taken skeptically that, well, it's your opinion, maybe it's not so. However, I heard it in the last day or two, and more than once, from somebody whom I'm following. It's Yuri Shvets. And he's very well-informed commentator on the Ukrainian and Russian affairs and so on. And he voiced the same opinion that if it wouldn't be for naive, I'm trying to be very nice to US policies of 91, 94, the Ukraine today and all the world wouldn't have this huge problem. And it wouldn't have to be, you see, Jonathan, when you said that the Americans, they made the blunders, that they overestimated Russia and underestimated Ukrainians, where comes overestimating estimating on Russia? And why everybody in US is talking with such a great deal of respect for Russia and unable or unwilling to criticize Russia? You know why? Because it's a Tsar bomb of 50 megatons, because it's 6,000 warheads. That's the only reason why. But you yourself created that problem. You allowed them to keep their arsenal intact when they had nothing, even no food on the table or so on, and even take over arsenals from Ukraine, the third largest in the world at the time, and Kazakhstan and Belarus and so on. So now you are influenced by your own decisions. This is my opinion on that.
Well, and in effect, what we have allowed the perception in the Russians correctly perceived over the course of the Cold War and thereafter that it was the apparent growth and strength of their nuclear arsenal, which was forcing the United States to change its policy or to accommodate its policy to Russian foreign policy goals. That was the case during the Cold War. And it was only interestingly enough, it was the emergence and declaration of Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative in 1983, which absolutely terrified the Russians. And they started displaying a pattern of response that shows that the Russian leadership, more than anything else, fear more than anything else is the potential of American technology to neutralize the one thing that makes them a great power. And they've been terrified of the Patriot system, as far as my research can indicate, ever since 1985, when the the Patriot, and as a matter of fact, I was the brigade intelligence officer in 1985 of the Patriot of the U.S. Air Defense Artillery Brigade, where it had the first 2 Patriot battalions deployed in Darmstadt, in Germany. And the brigade commander asked me to check and see if the Russians are saying anything about Patriot. Well, I did. I checked out that January 85 issue of Vestnik pro Vozdushnoi Obrony, and they had the article. The author thought that the Patriot system was intended eventually for the strategic defense, ABM defense of targets of installations in the United States. The Russians thought that Patriot was the leading edge of the Star Wars program. In fact, it was not. It was a natural progression of that they did. And when the Americans saw how effective it was in 1991, even in 1990, it was not 100% interception rate, but it was enough to influence the outcome of the war in Desert Storm. So, as you've seen, the effectiveness of Patriot has increased to such an extent that the Russians' fears have apparently been realized, that the Patriot's interception rate is near 100%. And so that shows the potential that American technology, properly directed and utilized, has the potential to neutralize the main factor of Russia's political strength at this point, their nuclear arsenal. They have been leaning on that nuclear arsenal very heavily in the post-Cold War era. They were leaning on it in the Cold War era, but even more so, ironically enough, in the post-Cold War era. So this points to the fact that we should be, as we continue to reinforce Ukraine's defenses and effectively make them able to drive the Russians out and execute their counteroffensive successfully, we should be able to conclude a successful peace, and a peace that is reinforced by a strong defensive structure and economic reconstruction of Ukraine.
Yeah, we are living in a very interesting time. Jonathan, I agree with you on Russian obsession with the Patriot systems, because I remember when Poland joined NATO, and shortly thereafter, the Americans were planning to install Patriot systems in Poland. And Russians were crying and demanding that it should not be done. Patriots will attack Russia sooner or later. We are not allowing that. So there was so much noise, and now Ukraine has Patriot systems and Russians cannot even say a word. Actually, it is incredible how I don't care about the Tsar bomb and all this nonsense. As a matter of fact, I don't believe that Russians could employ Tsar bomb today. They could do it in 1961, but they will not be able to do it today. But it's just my thought. I think that this last few days showed incredible weakness of Russia, its air, its defensive systems, the President Putin, who is not only complete idiot, but he's just really a scared little old man who was hiding when things happening, and he had to reassure the nation that okay, there is an uprising and we are going to end it in the next hour and a half, 3 hours and a half, or whatever. He just went into hiding, and nobody even knew whether he's in Valdai or St. Petersburg or Ural Mountains or maybe in Mongolia or who knows, Altai, or nobody knew where he was. This is what unfortunately Ukrainians have to deal with for some time to come, but I think the Russian might, the military willpower to continue the war and to win this war is gone, is done, and now Ukrainian offensive will just growing really crazy in the next few days, and I hope We'll see it when
Their
we
momentum does seem to be increasing.
absolutely. And actually, because everybody was so busy with Prigozhin and all this
It's a
tales,
distraction.
it was a distraction because we were not following very closely. But well, I did follow that Ukrainians are doing extremely well, and they are advancing in multiple directions. And this is what puzzles Russians. They don't understand where is the main trust will be there. It's
And
fantastic.
they're holding off on they're holding off very cleverly, holding off on throwing that main punch until they see what they perceive as the best
You know what
opportunity to
Ukrainians
finish it.
if you know enough about chess game and strategies, okay, there are mainly two different strategies. One is to going for all-out attack, like ex-world champion, unfortunately, today is 30 days since he's passed away, Michael Tal. He was a great, great genius of chess. So he was going for an attack, and he had brilliant combinations. But if it was not properly prepared attack, it was squashed, and he was losing a lot of games, although he was winning many, many more. But there is another strategy. It's a positional strategy. You don't go for attack until you prepare weakness in your opponent's position, and then you start build up attack against that weakness, or maybe other. There is another rule in chess that one weakness does not allow you to win the game. You have to create second weakness in your opponent's position, and then you can attack and maneuver and attack simultaneously or one at a time, both weaknesses. So this
it would seem that if you compared the chess players for Russia and Ukraine, Russia appeared to be the first type trying to go for an all-out
without
push.
preparation, without
they just went for it, and the Ukrainians parried that. And then in their counteroffensive, they seem to very much to resemble that second type of main chess strategy, positional chess player. Yeah. And they're just probing for weakness and very steadily building up cumulative advantages, until eventually the advantage will be such that the Russian chess player is losing pieces, not just pawns.
Historically, although I love Michael Taus and his combinations, but historically it's been proven that positional strategy is more sound than the attacking strategy, because attacking strategy, it's kind of in a game of chance. If your opponent will not fight proper defense, so okay, you will win and many games. But those opponents who will find a proper defense and who will not lose their call, then you lose against this opponent. So these Russians are found the exact opponent that they will lose against, who is cool, prepared positional plan of defenses and attacks, and we are witnessing exactly what's happened on the front lines right now. Gentlemen, I would like to thank you very much for today's program, and hopefully we will have back on Friday a great news to discuss. Thank you very much. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава. Bye.
Bye-bye.